So I'm down here on the floor where hopefully you can see my palette and a bit of canvas where I want to illustrate some different paint applications. And we're going to talk about squishy paint. I've gotten several questions recently about squishy or mushy paint. And I have to admit, when I first read those emails, I thought, well, yeah, my paint's squishy too. But I think really after giving this a lot of thought, I'm pretty certain that what they're complaining about isn't the squishy quality so much as it is the result of the squishiness, which is, once paint gets touched too many times, artists have various adjectives for that. It's none of them very flattering. Usually it's mud or noodled or tortured or overworked. And, even mud can be beautiful, but if it's put on cleanly. But, when things just get touched too many times, it will create an undesirable look that most people don't like. And so, everybody has their own tolerance for it, and everybody's working with different procedures and different materials. So it's sort of one of those things that you do have to do a lot of figuring out on your own. But some of it there's some common unintentional things people do that creates mud or overworked areas. And one of them that I've noticed in my classes is that people are often cleaning their brushes out in some very mucky thinner. And then when they go to, add a new color, they're working a lot of old yucky pigment into that mixture just right off the bat with a dirty brush. And if they'll take that same brush and I always keep a separate container with some clean thinner, just a little one, but I dip that in it maybe a couple times and really clean that brush off. And if you do that, just make sure that there's no more dirty pigment in there. And then when you go to put something on there again, it will be the color you want to use rather than it being, a mixture of everything else you've put on with that brush. Some other things that people kind of unintentionally do is they'll mix a lot on the canvas. And what I mean by that is they'll, say they put up a color up there, and then they'll decide, well, that should be lighter, and they'll mix a little white in. And then maybe I come by and say, well, that really should be a little bit cooler. And so they'll get just a little bit of blue on there, and then they start trying to mix that in. And that won't ever look as nice as just really getting the right note. If you have a color up there that's not quite cool enough, mix it cooler and put on a nice thick note of that. Don't try to change what's up there. Not only will you mess up any nice strokes of paint and the paint texture, but you're going to it's not going to be very effective. Another thing to do is be very careful, or what I see people doing that I don't do, is mixing a lot of opaque notes together. A lot of people use a much, much more white in their shadow areas and all over than I do. And they'll put their paint on heavier all over than I do. Maybe they've seen some nice, goopy, thick paintings that they like. And sometimes they are thick all over, but if you look carefully, a lot of times those shadows aren't in a lot of people's work, in the people who create a lot of depth in their work. The shadows generally are fairly thin and fairly transparent. So if you're using transparent colors, even if they're very opposite colors, like here we've got some alizarin crimson, and then we've got some, I'm going to go with some viridian. And you can mix those together just about all you want, and you're never going to create a lot of mud. It's really going to be a kind of, I've never felt like I was creating mud with a transparent note of paint. But the minute you start adding opaque notes into those, and particularly mixing them in, you're gonna start, that's when the mud starts occurring. That's when you get that really, yucky, overworked look start to happen. And so just be, trying to be more sure about where you want your opaque notes to be and not moving them around a lot. And when you do paint on top of them, don't paint on top of them in a way that they smush in so much. Just mix the right note and lay it on there. Lay it on top of it. So using enough paint. I mean, sometimes you're using, people will use too much paint. Sometimes they won't use enough paint. It's one of those Goldilocks things that everybody has to develop a feel for. But either one can be a problem. And another thing that I commonly see in my classes as a problem is people having a surface that's really difficult to work on. Either it's so rough that it's hard to cover, or it's so smooth and non-absorbent that it's hard to cover. And so they're working a lot just to try to cover the canvas, and they're having to make a lot more touches on their painting than they need to just to get the surface covered. So it doesn't have to be an expensive surface. Even just gessoed panels can be fine if they're not too smooth or not too rough, if they're not fighting you. But those are some very common things that people are doing that create problems that I would say are unintentional. Now, there's a lot of times people will add mediums such as liquid or something, and if that'll definitely make your paint squishier. But if you find yourself, if you've added liquid in all your paint and then you're unhappy because your paint has the consistency of liquid, I think most of you can figure that one out on your own. But some of these others are kind of hard to track down. Definitely there's paints that are squishier than others, and I tend to like the ones with a little bit more body. Especially the whites, I think that's because usually you want your whites thicker, and because they are in so much of your paint. That's a really critical thing, and most painters are very picky about the whites they use. I happen to like this Gamblin flake white replacement because it has a little bit more body. But if I were working out in cold weather on the spot, it probably would be too, it would probably be hard to work with, I think. I'd want something softer. So, that's a real personal taste thing that you're just going to have to develop your own feel for. So, standing back every few strokes so that you aren't just picking away at something and mindlessly trying to correct it. But the thing that's going to make the biggest difference, I would say, for most of us is you learning to see shapes better and learning to see values more accurately. And that allows you to put things down in the right place and the right shape to start with, right notes. But really keep in mind that really what's beautiful about oil paints is this wonderful way that it is squishy. That should be an advantage, not a liability. And so figuring out a way to make it work for you and not against you, because that's what distinguishes oils from some of the quick drying mediums like egg tempera, where they have to do edges with cross hatching or something. And this is a lot of the beauty of oils, is that they are mushy. But and last but not least, one thing you need to probably get really good at is getting paint off. Once you get it on there and it's nice and mucky and mushy and you've made a big mess, figure out a way to get it off of there. I usually scrape it down. If there's a lot of buildup, I scrape it down and then I'll just wipe it off with a paper towel. People have squeegees and all kinds of things they use, but and then when I go back and work on top of that, then I kind of work on top of that ghost, and I use that, as a way to. I try to not lose all of that softness that I created when I, smushed things together. But with practice, this will get better. If you try all these and you're still having problems, take some close-up photos of your surface before you paint, some close-up areas of the muddy areas you're talking about, and tell me what you're using, and get those photos, and be as descriptive as you can about what you're using, and I'll see if I can help you identify the problem. But a lot of it is just being more familiar with your materials, and as I said, practicing those seeing skills. It always comes back to those seeing skills. It's hard to get away from that, whether you're talking about edges or light or paint quality or smushy. It all comes back to the same thing.
My name is Robb, and I've been a professional artist for over 40 years. I first began taking art classes in Tulsa, Oklahoma while still in high school, and later moved to New York City to study art. My work has been featured a number of times over the years in publications such as Art of the West, The Artist Magazine, and Southwest Art, to name a few. For nearly 40 years, I have continuously been exhibiting my paintings in galleries, museums, and national shows. My teaching career spans several decades, and in this online course, I will show you the methods that experience has taught me work well to get information across to students. When conducting a workshop, I have two main goals. One is to help the students sharpen their ability to observe from an artist's point of view, something we are all continuously trying to improve on. These seeing skills are essential to every aspect of painting, from the relationships of values, color, shapes, and edges, to composition and creating a center of interest. My other goal is to show the students the ways I push the boundaries of what my materials are capable of in order to create a convincing feeling of light, form, and depth in my paintings. The demonstrations will be still life studies in oil, but most of the theories and lessons will apply to any medium or subject matter. Hope to see you in my course.